first Grand Prix you remember?
Dutch Grand Prix 1978, which is about a 2-second flash memory I'm still storing up here somewhere. So it is
So
this
you
car.
saw this car?
It is this car, yes, being held up to the fence by my mother waiting for Daddy's car to come around. And when this car came past, I was held and pushed a little bit higher up the fence, and it was terrifying, I think, for a 3-year-old. But yes, this is sort of the earliest time that I recall seeing a racing car in the flesh was an FW06 at Zandvoort.
And I was saying earlier, as we looking at the picture in the entrance hall, it was a very, very nice car. It's a shame about the ground effect era that arrived, but that rear wing beam mounting, very classic Patrick, and the whole rear suspension and layout kind of set the tone of Williams for the next 4 or 5 years, perhaps even more.
I would say even more. I mean, when I'm talking about this car, I think it does represent the foundation for the success that Williams has built for itself over the decades, in that it was for the first time in the Williams name in Formula One, so to speak, it was the first simultaneous occurrence of the best engineering in terms of Patrick's contribution to that, a world-class driver, strong and consistent sponsorship, and strong sporting management. I think the efforts of Williams, or Frank Williams, in the World Championship from 1969 up until this point had always lacked at least one of those key ingredients, but all 4 of those boxes were ticked by this car, by this particular era of Williams' history, and we haven't looked back.
Well, this is a nice little corner, surrounded by Williams FW07s, arguably, well, I say arguably, I asked your dad the other day, the car that he gravitates most to when he comes into the museum, that he has the most feeling for, and he said probably the 07. And it's unsurprising for what it did for the company, and
without a doubt,
the first Grand Prix. And we've got, well, what have we got here actually? Which is the earlier 07? It's got to be that one.
The original car from 1979 is the one to my right, which is chassis 2. That's the actual car with which Clay Records-Only won the 1979 British Grand Prix, so the first of 114 victories for this team. And then behind us, elevated highest of all in our collection to represent the first titles won by this team, is 1980's FW07B. Again, a high history chassis number 9, the car that Jones was driving at the Canadian Grand Prix when he sealed the World Championship with a race victory, and then went on to win the season finale at Watkins Glen, again in this car. And then 1981's FW07C, which successfully defended the Constructors' World Championship. And this is chassis 12, Carlos Reutemann's first half of the year car, with which he won the Brazilian and Belgian Grand Prix, and in the season, of course, where he missed the Drivers' World Championship by just a single point.
And won the South African Grand Prix too.
In an FW07B. I think for the opening races of the year, just for the opening race of the year, which of course should have been Kyle Army, we did have the B specification cars. The C specification cars were introduced at Long Beach, which went on to be the opening round of the World Championship, questionably, I guess.
Interesting to see technique d'avant-garde on the cars here. This was, of course, the arrival of Mansour at Williams as a sponsor, as he was
Indeed,
at the time.
yes.
A sponsor procured initially by Charlie Crichton Stewart, who we love and miss a lot.
Miss dearly, yes.
Instrumental, one of the key figures in the early days of Williams, and Mansour subsequently left to go to McLaren, as we all know, and finance the TAG Porsche engine, and that really put TAG on the map, and he bought Hoyer Watch Company. But he started life here at Williams and won Grand Prix with Williams. So
Grand Prix and of course World Championships, the constructors in 1981, the drivers in 1982, so yeah, good success as well.
And we've got some good old boys here actually. We've got AJ and Carlos Reutemann up there. Not a bad team actually.
No, I think
as it goes.
The FW07 does have a bit of a who's who of drivers. Of course, it had its own world champion in Alan Jones, race winners in Clay Records-Only, Carlos Reutemann. It gave Keke Rosberg his first few starts in his world championship winning season of 1982 before his successor, the FW08, arrived. And we shouldn't forget Mario Andretti, of course, winner of the Sebring 12-hour race in 1970. as well as a World Championship in 1978. But let's talk about Sebring if we're going to talk about Mario.
That was a race win and a half.
That was a race win and a half, yes. So
Stephen Queen was really quick that day.
true, yeah, and Pedro.
And Peter
Rowson.
But
it's amazing, you know, for me it still resonates with me greatly that we had Mario Andretti drive our cars, even though just for one weekend. That still impresses the hell out of me, it really does. So whenever the 07's on the table, it's always worth discussing, even though I don't think it was the greatest weekend from either party's point of view, based upon some comments coincidentally Mario made quite recently about 1982. I didn't realise that he didn't really, by the sounds of it, enjoy his weekend at the wheel of one of our cars, but still.
Well, I think the problem was, Johnny, and again I was there, the problem was that obviously the cars were running with zero suspension, we know that.
Of course, yeah.
And Long Beach was a very bumpy circuit, and it was one thing to go to Monza and do a comeback in a Ferrari at Monza, which he did beautifully and he got the pole, but it was quite another to jump into a car at Long Beach, as bumpy as it was, and adjust immediately to having no suspension and the sort of jarring you get.
Of course.
You know, and I still smart at the comments that are made about Carlos's drive at Vegas in '81 and how weakly from the outside the championship went away. But you know, he wasn't the only guy to have terrible races if he got a tyre imbalance. And remember, the next race was the Brazilian Grand Prix, when Pironi in the second Ferrari, or the other Ferrari, was absolutely nowhere.
Whereas Gilles was running right up at the front.
And after the race I said to Pironi what happened, and he said, tyre vibration, couldn't drive the car, couldn't even see where I was going. It's exactly what happened to Carlos in Vegas, and of course, because it wasn't a championship decider, people didn't take any note of it.
Yeah, there was something certainly beyond Carlos amiss at Las Vegas in 1981. I mean, a car as competitive as the FW07C was that weekend, as emphasised by Alan Jones, I just don't see a reason within the drivers as why there was such a different performance. I think it was probably, as you say, something that was upsetting Carlos's car. So likewise with Mario, but still such an honour to have had a driver of Mario Andretti's calibre and stature driving a Williams, even though it was for one weekend that not everyone knows about. So. And
also this was the era, I should add, of Neil Oatley, who was Carlos's race engineer that year, and he was obviously part of the Williams team in the early days. Now chief designer at McLaren. And
bookshopper at Goodwood, along with you, me and Roadblock.
So, by Roadblock, Johnny refers rudely to Nigel
affectionately. And David Tremaine taught me that nickname. I didn't come up with it by myself.
Well, no 08s, standard 08s here, Johnny, but we've got the six-wheeler, which kind of makes up for everything. How many, is this the only six-wheeler in existence? Williams six-wheeler in existence?
It is. In fact, we only ever produced one gearbox unit for the six-wheel project. And the six-wheel project, in terms of its first testing, started life in FW07 specification. That was the FW07D. And then when it transferred across to the FW08, it came after the introduction of the original FW08 race car, the Rosberg title-winning vehicle. So the 08 that it was assigned to, as is this car here, is known as FW08B. So the six-wheel type Williams were FW07D and FW08B, but it was the one and only gearbox that covered, I think, it travelled around 4 chassis during its lifetime as a gearbox, 2 FW07s and 2 FW08s, looking at the various green sheets that we have.
It'd be really interesting to run this car again to see what its top speed would be, because that's what it was all about, this car. And I remember at the time the energy around the whole project, because Williams had produced the 07, which had just blown everything else away in terms of its skirts, the way the skirts sat on the ground effect and the downforce it was generating. And everybody thought, what can they do next? And then Patrick produced this. And it just, and a couple of years before, Tyrrell had the six-wheeler and
the P34.
Yeah, but it still had lots of drag because it still had the same rear wheels and tyres. And all of a sudden, this was the future, and it was just mind-blowingly fast.
It was. I mean, in some ways, it was also a response to a dawn of a new era in Formula One, a mainstream order, which was turbos, and it took Williams a little longer to procure a partnership with a manufacturer to supply us a turbo engine than it did our rivals. So in some ways it was one way of maximising the raw ingredients that we had available to us, and I believe had it had the opportunity to have taken to a Grand Prix starting grid, it would have proved, I believe it would have had a Brabham fan car moment, one weekend of driving into the distance to seal the win, pending reliability, and then probably a lot of heated debate following, and then maybe it wouldn't have been seen again. But
well, given that is what happened with the fan car, it's ridiculous that isn't what happened with the six-wheeler. They should have allowed it to do at least the one race based on what happened with the fan car, because it got that win and it's there in the history books forevermore. And that was clearly an illegal car that was making mockery of the regulations, whereas this was not at all illegal, and it was absolutely dead square illegal. And after it was built, they then decided to ban it before it raced. It was, talk about a waste of money and time.
Well, I guess that's something that the organisers should be criticised for, is basically the waste of resource that we were subsequently subjected to. But that's part and parcel of it. You sort of accept that and you pick yourself up and you go along, I guess. But
I'd forgotten Petromin oil.
Yeah.
Is that on the other 08Cs?
It's on the FW08. I think Mobil is on the 1983 car, the FW08C. That partnership commenced by then. I can't tell you too much about it, other than it was an oil partner that we had during this period of Williams. But it's a nice logo.
It's a very nice logo, and of course, it was in the Middle East that your dad met Wally McDonald of Mobil. He was running the Middle East Mobil division, which is how the whole Mobil sponsorship came. It came on the back of the whole Middle Eastern thing as well.
Which ran for a long time, of course, all the way up until we partnered with Renault, which therefore meant ELF in 1989.
Yeah, well, Williams brought Mobil 1 into Formula 1.
And it's still here today.
Synthetic oil, still there today.
Still winning Grand Prix today.
Yeah, yeah.